All right, shalom, shalom, shalom. Welcome back. You are live and direct with your Akazaki Yahoo. As always, I'm giving all praises, honor, and great esteem unto the Most High Power, Yahweh, Bashem, Hamashiach, wa Malak, Yahweh Shah, and to the 12 tribes of Israel who are scattered to the four quarters of the earth. I say shalom, wa Baruchim. That is peace and blessings. And I cannot wait to the day when the Most High brings us back together and we are once again 12 tribes, one family, one nation, under the Most High Power, under one covenant, back in our own land with a heart of flesh and no more a heart of stone, with our enemies, our adversaries, and all those who hate us under our feet. All praises to the Almighty Yah. Hallelujah.
So be it. Hallelujah.
Yes, indeed. I'm joined this evening by my most esteemed Akenanaya. Shalom, Akik.
Hey, Shalawam Akik, Shalawam Yasharal, Yahweh Ba'ashem, Yahweh Shabbarakatham.
Yes, indeed. All praises to the Most High Yahweh, in the name of His beloved Son, Yahweh Shah, the Messiah. Bless you. So we are back for another video review. We got a couple of videos we're gonna run through nice and easy here, starting with this first video coming to us from Black Journals Unlocked, or Salaki, from Black Journals, and it is how Black soldiers crush the KKK's power. So let's get to it and get through it. All praise to the Most High. Here we go.
In the spring of 1865, the Civil War ended, and millions of former slaves stepped into freedom. On roads once lined with auction blocks, Black men and women walked with unchained steps for the first time in their lives. Some carried bundles on their backs. Others held the hands of children they swore never to lose again. They were no longer property. They were free. And freedom, for them, meant everything. The right to work for a wage, to send a child to school, to marry legally, to claim land, to worship without surveillance, and above all, to vote. They had earned it in blood, labor, and loyalty. But freedom, they discovered, would be stalked by fear. Barely had the Union's victory parades ended before shadows began to stir across the South. Not all Confederates had gone quietly. Some melted back into civilian life, simmering with defeat, while others plotted in the dark. In towns across Tennessee, Georgia, Alabama, and the Carolinas, rumors crept like smoke of white men riding at night, hooded and faceless, leaving notes nailed to freedmen's doors. Leave this land. You'll die if you vote. The South will rise again. They dressed in white robes and claimed to be the ghosts of dead Confederate soldiers, risen to torment those who had dared to rebel against white rule. They called themselves the Ku Klux Klan, and their aim was to reverse Reconstruction by terror. By 1868, the Klan had become an organized insurgency. They burned churches, shot into cabins, dragged men from their beds, and beat them bloody. Their violence was systematic and strategic. In Georgia alone, 336 cases of racial terrorism were reported in the 6 months leading to the 1868 election, each designed to strip Black people of the right they had only just gained, the right to vote. And yet, the freed people did not retreat. Armed Black men, many of them veterans fresh from the battlefields of the Civil War, refused to bow to the terror creeping through their towns. Side by side with newly formed militias and U.S. colored troops, they stood between their families and the violence determined to crush their oppressors. For the first time, former slaves became the guardians of their own freedom, locking arms with a federal government that finally seemed ready to listen to their calls for protection and equal rights. But what would come next would turn out to be a great struggle, one that would test the very limits of their resolve. This is the chapter of American history that generations of white radicals worked desperately to keep out of the textbooks. The real story of how Black soldiers crushed the KKK's power. As we prepare to tell this powerful narrative, make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications. These stories rarely get the spotlight they deserve, and every subscription helps bring them to new ears. If the fight for justice and dignity moves you, this is a journey you won't want to miss. Now let's begin. In the first months of freedom after the war, Black communities established schools, churches, and civic organizations. Many sought to secure land, either by renting or purchasing, believing that economic independence would protect their new status. The hunger for literacy spread like wildfire as newly freed people viewed education as essential to true, lasting liberation. To no surprise, these efforts cultivated intense white resentment. For many Southern whites, defeat in the Civil War was a profound existential crisis that shattered long-standing social and racial hierarchies. The Confederacy's surrender did not erase deeply rooted beliefs in white supremacy or the obsessive desire to restore absolute control over the black population. Instead, a deep sense of humiliation and anger took root. Many former slaveholders and Confederate soldiers returned home determined to reassert their dominance through any possible means, legal or violent. And so, the immediate post-war period saw the emergence of harsh, restrictive black codes, cruel laws designed to smother black freedom. Passed across the southern states between 1865 and 1867, these laws aimed to trap black people in a new form of subjugation. They barred them from owning property in certain areas, made it nearly impossible to testify against whites in court, and established vagrancy statutes that allowed authorities to arrest anyone not working for a white employer. Many codes required black people to sign exploitative labor contracts or risk being fined, jailed, or forced into unpaid work through so-called apprenticeship or convict leasing systems. Marriage, movement, and assembly were all tightly regulated, with curfews and pass systems echoing the old slave patrols. These laws made clear that while slavery was abolished in name, the struggle for genuine freedom would be bitterly contested at every turn. But legal constraints were only the beginning of a much darker resistance. It was in the aftermath of war that the Ku Klux Klan slithered out of the wreckage. In the shadowy corners of Pulaski, Tennessee, during the dying days of 1865, 6 bitter young men, fresh from Confederate defeat, formed what looked at first like a harmless fraternity. They called it the Ku Klux, twisting the Greek word kiklos for circle, as if secrecy and brotherhood could shield them from the new world being born outside their doors. By candlelight, their laughter turned to whispered plots, and what started as a club quickly curdled into something sinister, a conspiracy against black freedom, a scheme to claw back the power they had lost. Those first gatherings became something out of a fever dream. The men cloaked themselves in robes and masks, weaving rituals from mock chivalry and cruel humor, summoning the old ghosts of Southern legend. But their real collective desire was to spark terror, and soon their small circle grew. By 1867, the organization had adopted a rigid, hierarchical structure, with local dens and state realms, all answering to a shadowy national leadership. This formalization mirrored military command, with titles such as Grand Dragon for state leaders and Grand Cyclops for local chiefs. Nathan Bedford Forrest, a former slave trader and Confederate general infamous for the mass murder of surrendering black Union soldiers at Fort Pillow, was named the Klan's first Grand Wizard. Under his ruthless influence, the Klan expanded rapidly and became an instrument of widespread terror. The Klan's tactics quickly spread beyond Tennessee, taking root in nearly every southern state by the late 1860s. Its networks operated in secrecy, but their presence was felt in every county plagued by racial violence. Local chapters communicated through coded messages and secret oaths, and their leadership regularly met to plan coordinated campaigns. In some regions, the Klan was so closely intertwined with local elites that mayors, sheriffs, and judges were rumored to be members themselves. This allowed the Klan to act with near impunity. The primary aim of the Ku Klux Klan was to reverse every fragile gain of Reconstruction by systematically intimidating black people and their white allies. They developed a distinctive style of terror. Its members appeared at night, masked and draped in ghostly white robes, claiming to be the restless spirits of dead Confederate soldiers. This chilling image was meant to inspire raw fear and reinforce the idea that resistance to white rule was unnatural and doomed. Klan members targeted black voters, courageous teachers, landowners, ministers, and even federal officials. Acts of violence ranged from savage whippings and brutal beatings to arson, sexual abuse, and murder. Their attacks were often meticulously coordinated with the political calendar, intensifying around elections or periods of Black civic mobilization. Their reign of terror had also been reinforced by the complicity of local authorities and the silence of neighbors too afraid to intervene. Because of this, their reputation for vengeance grew so powerful that mere rumors of their involvement could empty meeting halls or drive entire families to flee in the night. And so for Black Americans, the rise of the Klan was both a physical and psychological assault of staggering proportions. The constant looming threat of violence forced many to live in a state of paralyzing anxiety, often compelled to make impossible choices between personal safety and basic civic participation. Nighttime became a period of special terror, with families keeping desperate watch or fleeing into the dark woods at the sound of hooves or gunfire. Yet, despite these ever-present dangers, many continued to organize, to attend meetings, and to vote. Black newspapers chronicled the threats and attacks in harrowing detail, while also urging readers not to yield to intimidation. By the late 1860s, the Klan had established itself as a formidable obstacle to Reconstruction. Its tactics of relentless intimidation, orchestrated violence, and psychological warfare worked to suppress Black political participation and undermine the hard-won, fragile gains of emancipation. The question now facing the nation was whether freedom would be protected or whether terror and lawlessness would define the future of the South. Fortunately, in the shadow of this terror, a new force was already gathering, one that white radicals had not anticipated. Black veterans, many still wearing the uniforms of the Union Army, returned to Southern towns as defenders of their communities. These men, trained by war and forged in struggle, began to take on a role no one at that time had foreseen, policing, patrolling, and enforcing the fragile rights of freedom that the Klan sought to destroy. Indeed, in the turbulent years following the Civil War, one of the most remarkable yet seldom discussed developments in Southern society was the visible presence of Black soldiers in policing and law enforcement roles. In towns and cities once ruled by the whip and overseer, it was now Black men who took up arms in defense of the freed population. In South Carolina, this new era of Black resistance produced heroes whose names deserve to be remembered. Among them was Jim Williams, a Union Army veteran and captain of the Black militia in York County. After the war, Williams returned to his community determined not only to claim his own freedom, but to defend it for others. He took charge of organizing freedmen into armed self-defense units, drilling them, and patrolling rural roads to protect neighbors from the constant threat of night riders and the KKK. Under his leadership, Black families who had once cowered at dusk began to resist. Williams's men escorted Black voters to polling places, guarded homes, and stood watch over church gatherings, long targeted for violence. Williams' courage was legendary in York County. He openly confronted white aggressors, reported attacks to federal authorities, and worked with sympathetic officials to demand real justice. His boldness transformed him into a symbol of hope for Black communities, and unfortunately, marked him as a prime target for white radicals determined to restore the old order through violence. In March 1871, that danger arrived at his door. Lured from his home by a white mob, Williams was kidnapped, beaten, and lynched in cold blood, his body left hanging in public view as a message of terror. It was a sick and calculated act meant to crush Black organization and to warn every freedman who dared stand up. News of Williams' murder erupted across the South and the nation. Black and white newspapers alike detailed the atrocity, forcing the country to confront the ugly reality of white radical violence. In Congress, his killing was brandished as undeniable evidence. The South's so-called peace was built on fear and brutality, and only federal power could protect Black lives and preserve the fragile gains of Reconstruction. The murder of Jim Williams exposed a new reality to both Black and white Southerners alike. For the Klan, the rise of armed Black leadership and militias like Williams's upended their vision of the South. No longer could they count on Black submission or invisibility. The sight of Black men organizing, patrolling, and defending their towns unsettled not only the Klan's rank and file, but also its most determined leaders. The shock ran so deep that it found its way into congressional testimony and the pages of national newspapers. During the sweeping anti-Klan campaigns in South Carolina, led by Major Lewis Merrill of the 7th U.S. Cavalry, numerous captured Klansmen and white townspeople confessed to investigators that the sight of black soldiers in federal uniform patrolling Southern streets was deeply disturbing. Many had believed the end of the Civil War would mean a return to the old hierarchy. Black men quietly working the fields, invisible from public power. Instead, these men now carried rifles, issued orders, and arrested white citizens, roles that upended the very foundation of Klan propaganda, which insisted that only white men could rule and protect Southern society. The congressional record from 1871 and 1872 is filled with similar accounts. Federal officers Major Merrill and General Daniel Sickles described how the presence of armed black troops altered the balance of power. In many towns, Merrill reported, the Klan's activities dropped sharply wherever black soldiers were assigned to patrols or detachments. Black regiments, like the 18th U.S. Infantry, were deployed in North and South Carolina, and even hostile local newspapers remarked on the unsettling effect their presence had on would-be night riders. These radicals were right to be afraid for their own good, as the armed black men did not hesitate to pursue and arrest white night riders, often at considerable personal risk. Dozens of former Confederates, including local power brokers, were rounded up and charged with crimes ranging from intimidation to murder. For Southerners accustomed to impunity, the spectacle of black men arresting whites was truly a stunning reversal. Of course, legal victories against the Klan were never achieved by law alone. They relied on the credible threat and frequent reality of federal force. Take Arkansas as an example. In the years immediately after the war, Klan violence there was so severe that black schools were torched, teachers were whipped, and entire families were driven from their homes. Black citizens and their allies, determined to see justice done, filed dozens of lawsuits accusing local Klansmen of crimes ranging from arson and assault to outright murder. Under normal circumstances, these cases would have been heard in county courts, where judges, jurors, and even sheriffs were often former Confederates or Klan sympathizers themselves. In such courts, convictions were rare. The accused Klansmen would often be acquitted or never brought to trial at all. But federal intervention changed the equation. Many of these federal judges were themselves former Union officers or men personally committed to Reconstruction, and their courtrooms became one of the only places in the South where a black victim's testimony stood a fair chance. For the white establishment, this newfound situation triggered panic and outrage. Southern newspapers and politicians railed against the humiliation of having black soldiers in authority, claiming that their presence threatened public morals and order. President Andrew Johnson himself, deeply hostile to the aims of radical Reconstruction, repeatedly sought to remove black troops from Southern cities, arguing that their visibility offended white citizens and disrupted reconciliation. When he dismissed General Oliver Otis Howard, chief of the Freedmen's Bureau, it was partly because Howard had refused to withdraw black regiments from areas where freed people were most vulnerable to attack. But Congress, determined to enforce the rights of the freedmen, pushed back. Federal lawmakers insisted that as long as Southern states failed to protect their black citizens, the Army's black regiments would remain on duty. The most decisive blow against the Klan would come from Washington, D.C., from a Congress that, after years of testimony and exposure, finally moved to act against the campaign of terror in the South. In April 1871, Congress passed the Ku Klux Klan Act, also known as the Civil Rights Act of 1871. Signed into law in April of that year, it was a landmark piece of legislation, pushed through by Republicans who refused to accept the reign of terror in the former Confederacy. The act gave President Ulysses S. Grant sweeping new powers. He could suspend habeas corpus, declare martial law, and send federal troops, including black regiments, to any county where civil rights were being violently suppressed. It also authorized the Justice Department to prosecute Klan crimes directly in federal court, sidestepping local juries that had long protected white vigilantes. President Grant, himself a former general who had led Union forces to victory in the Civil War, did not hesitate. He relied on the advice of Attorney General Amos T. Ackerman, a former Confederate officer from Georgia turned fierce defender of black rights, and the military expertise of Major Lewis Merrill, commander of the 7th U.S. Cavalry, who was charged with military operations against the Klan in the Carolinas. Both men recognized that black troops would be crucial to restoring law and order in the South. The crackdown began in earnest in the fall of 1871. Grant first targeted South Carolina, especially York and Spartanburg counties, where Klan violence had reached a fever pitch. Major Merrill, an unflinching and methodical officer, led his integrated cavalry units, including black soldiers, into the heart of Klan territory. Guided by intelligence from local freedmen and undercover agents, Merrill's cavalry swept through remote hollows, dense forests, and isolated cabins, seeking out the men behind the masks. Black troops were instrumental in these raids, as they lended both the manpower and psychological weight that put Klansmen on the defensive. Within weeks, the results were dramatic. Black forces arrested around 600 suspected Klansmen in the initial sweep, breaking up entire cells and disrupting communications among Klan leaders. Attorney General Ackerman also personally traveled through the region, overseeing prosecutions and encouraging local black citizens to come forward with testimony. And many did, despite threats and risks. They recounted stories of whippings, arson, and lynching attempts. Freed women described being beaten for teaching children to read or for encouraging neighbors to vote. Ackerman and his team prepared dozens of indictments, moving cases into federal courts presided over by judges with little patience for the Klan's claims of self-defense or local tradition. In North Carolina and much of South Carolina, the effects of their labors began to show. By early 1872, black men and women returned to register and vote, often protected by local militias and by posts of black cavalry veterans whose presence alone deterred would-be attackers. The difference was stunning. Not long before, a single masked rider could silence an entire community. Now, rifle-toting black militiamen and federal patrols answered violence with determined resolve. Quiet elections were held in towns that just a few years earlier had been sites of arson and murder. For a brief, extraordinary period, the KKK as an organized, open force was shattered, thanks in no small part to the unwavering resolve and frontline service of black soldiers and lawmen. While racism and local violence would survive, the coordinated power of the Klan melted away in the face of sustained federal pressure. What remained was a fragile but real experiment in biracial democracy, guarded by the watchful eyes of black soldiers and the strong hand of the federal state. Yet unfortunately, the victories won by black communities and their allies in the early 1870s were never total or permanent. Every step forward was shadowed by compromise, retreat, and the enduring realities of power and prejudice. Even at the peak of federal intervention, the machinery of justice was uneven and often unfinished. For every Klansman brought before a federal court, there were others whose cases were quietly dismissed or delayed. State judges, still steeped in old loyalties, often stayed convictions on technical grounds or granted early releases. The Army, overstretched and sometimes reluctant to police civilian disputes, occasionally left regions with investigations incomplete or local witnesses unprotected. In some places, this meant the terror did not disappear. It merely paused or adapted, waiting for a less vigilant moment to resurface. Still, even with these flaws, the momentum was undeniable. The Klan, as an organized force, had been deeply wounded. By 1873, Republican leaders claimed with real justification that Klan-style violence had been driven underground in the territories they controlled. The Deep South's major cities saw the regular presence of federal troops who set up garrisons in courthouse squares and along major thoroughfares. This military presence made open raids nearly impossible. African Americans served as city police officers, sheriffs, and deputies. In towns from Wilmington, North Carolina, to Aberdeen, Mississippi, black lawmen patrolled streets and took part in arrests. With physical protection more reliable, black communities began to rebuild and expand the institutions that were essential to their lives. State legislatures, especially in places like South Carolina and Louisiana, included dozens of black lawmakers for the first time in American history. Freed people established landowning communities, tilled their fields, and built up churches that served as both spiritual and political sanctuaries. In many districts, Black teachers bravely reopened schools that had been burned by night riders. Lessons resumed, and new generations of children learned to read and write in buildings defended by their own neighbors. Regular life reflected these changes. Freed women, once forced to hide at dusk, now worked their small farms with a new measure of security. Families attended church services with their prayer books in hand, no longer afraid the building would be a target for arson. The air in Black neighborhoods, though always wary, was less heavy with dread. All of these advances were sustained by the knowledge that armed Black citizens and their supporters were ready to answer violence with determined resistance. The memory of what had been achieved, of what it felt like to stand one's ground and be protected by law, became a cherished legacy, passed down in family stories and local lore. But this moment of hope and relative safety did not last. The fragile peace that Black communities had fought so hard to win was soon battered by forces far beyond their control. In the early 1870s, the United States was experiencing explosive economic growth, fueled by railroad expansion, speculative investment, and rapid urbanization. However, much of this boom was built on shaky financial ground. Banks loaned recklessly to railroad companies, speculators, and industrial ventures, inflating a dangerous bubble. In September 1873, a major Philadelphia banking house, J. Cook and Company, heavily invested in the Northern Pacific Railroad, collapsed. Panic spread quickly through the financial sector. Banks failed across the country, factories shut their doors, and workers by the thousands lost their jobs. This cascading crisis became known as the Panic of 1873. The effects of this collapse were devastating and long-lasting. The depression that followed hit the North especially hard, plunging millions into poverty and throwing the nation's politics into turmoil. Newspapers that once tracked the horrors of Klan violence and celebrated stories of Black resilience now focused on urban unemployment, labor strikes, and the endless headlines of bank failures and bread lines. National attention turned inward, away from the unfinished business of Reconstruction and the fate of Black Southerners. The Northern public, exhausted by a decade of social conflict and now beset by their own crises, lost interest in the ongoing struggle for civil rights in the South. This economic turmoil fractured the political coalition that had driven Reconstruction. The Republican Party, already straining under accusations of corruption and internal divisions, was now forced to contend with fierce criticism over its handling of the Depression. Some Northern politicians began arguing that the federal government could no longer afford to keep troops stationed in the South or continue investing in Southern recovery. Others saw the mounting costs and political headaches as reason enough to abandon Reconstruction altogether. Sensing a shift, white Redeemer politicians in the South seized the opportunity to claw back power. Organizing under banners of restoring order and redeeming their states, they mobilized voters around the promise of a return to white rule. In practice, this meant a determined campaign to roll back Black political participation and undo the reforms of the past decade. Redeemer governments quickly targeted Black office holders, cut funding for Black schools, closed polling sites, and used both legal maneuvering and open intimidation to drive Black voters from the public sphere. The gains that had once seemed so hard-won were now eroded step by step. Meanwhile, federal troops, the thin blue line protecting Black communities, faced growing budget cuts and increasing pressure to withdraw. In some states, the number of garrisons fell to almost nothing, leaving freed people exposed once more to the threat of local violence and state-sanctioned discrimination. The absence of federal protection emboldened former Confederates, who wasted little time reasserting control through violence, fraud, and a renewed wave of intimidation. In a stunning act of reversal, Congress passed an amnesty law in 1873 that wiped away most of the remaining charges against Klansmen and their allies. Southern juries, often made up of men who had themselves participated in night rides, quietly acquitted friends and relatives accused of racial violence. Amnesty became official policy, and state courts eagerly cited it to release men charged with whipping, arson, and murder. By the late 1870s, federal enforcement of Reconstruction was little more than a memory. The last Union troops departed following the disputed presidential election of 1876, and with their exit, the formal era of Reconstruction came to a close. Although the Ku Klux Klan as a public organization faded into hiding, its ideals and networks survived in the shadows, ready to resurface when conditions allowed. For African Americans, the collapse of federal protection was devastating. Many watched as newly built schools were shuttered, elected officials forced out of office, and the fragile promise of safety and citizenship vanished seemingly overnight. What had felt like the dawn of a new era was revealed as a brief interlude, easily swept away by political expedience and economic disaster. Yet, for all the pain of this betrayal, the story did not end there. What endured was a living memory, carried from survivor to child and from neighbor to neighbor. In Arkansas, elders still told of the day Black troops lined the town square and Klansmen melted away rather than face determined resistance. Stories survived of Black doctors teaching neighbors to shoot, of veterans leading nighttime patrols, and of Black communities banding together to protect their own. In church basements and around kitchen tables, these tales were preserved not just as warnings, but as sources of pride. A reminder that Black resistance could drive even the Klan into retreat, and that dignity, once defended, could not be entirely erased by defeat. This legacy is, therefore, a complicated one, filled with both pride and bitterness. Yet, it beautifully reminds future generations that even in the face of crushing defeat and betrayal, there was once a moment when the law, the military, and the will of Black communities combined to protect hard-won freedoms. It shows a nation that the determined collaboration of the oppressed, standing together with arms and law, could blunt even the most vicious racism. If you found value in today's hidden history, make sure to subscribe, like, and hit the notification bell so you never miss amazing legacy.
Yes, indeed. And as always, links are in the description box of the videos that we do review. Man, interesting stuff. I was wondering where this stuff was today because there was a time not long ago where Black voters returned from voting in Florida. And that was um, Bush and Gore. During that election, they didn't get the vote. So Bush became president. Go figure. That's how much they needed all of that stuff under his administration to go down, as they were willing to turn away Black voters. But think about this: in this modern day, here, just over a week ago, the president of the United States ordered an airstrike against Nigeria. Go figure.
Mm-hmm.
Go figure that. So anyhow, uh, yeah, it was interesting. It almost seemed like almost a fairy tale when he was going into some of that historic. I was like, where this stuff at now? But yeah, it fell apart, and that not surprising because the reality that we see, the reality that we live in, and now voting is not as hindered as it once was, but um, the control of the people has been, it's crazy because there's no, there is no, what's the term I'm trying to use? There's no Black vote. I mean, there's no Black candidate. You know what I'm saying? So, uh, Black people vote for Trump. Black people voted for Kamala. Black people voted for, was there a third party? I don't know. But that doesn't exist anymore. So that's not even an issue or a situation. So all you have to do is put a candidate up that does stupid stuff and says ridiculous things, and the people won't know who to vote for because you're getting two sides of the same coin. So what do you do?
Con.
Is there it's not a Black party. A lot of Black people vote Democrat, but is the Democratic Party the Black party? We know the Republicans is a racist party. We know that, but Is a Democrat the resolution? Absolutely not. I don't think so, because a lot of what they believe in is folly. You know, they believe folly. So, uh, but back to the my apologies. I'm kind of going on a rant here. But back to what we just watched here. Very good stuff. That this was the case when they sent black soldiers to places to assist in getting the people getting things organized, shutting down the KKK, allowing the people to feel a bit of comfort. And this was still in the 1800s before um, things got modernized. So now, um, you know, it's we know what it is now because you're in it. Wherever you are, it's like that. So you may be, you know, dealing with police brutality. You may not have dealt with so much with police brutality, but I'm not going to say things are definitely fixed, but they are some improvements that we can see and that we can deal with. But that's all. I'll rest there. Go ahead, Aki.
You know, I'm glad we covered this, or are covering this, because it's a part of the plight of our people
Yeah.
here in this captivity. The threat ever looming over many of our people's heads, and they would have us to believe that the Ku Klux Klan is a less powerful organization these days, and I would disagree with that. I would say that we are in a lot of ways unsure of their membership.
Right.
And I think that it's just become like a lot of other racism. It's institutionalized now. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? It's just
Yeah.
a part of the norm and culture
Mhm.
here in this country. Uh, you know, Nathan Bedford Forrest, being one of the originators of the Ku Klux Klan, and they're in Pulaski, Tennessee, which is probably I think maybe about an hour and a half south of or maybe about an hour south of Nashville,
Mhm.
going towards Alabama. Uh, my ancestors, my grandfather's grandfather, fought in the Civil War against him.
Mhm.
They were, my grandfather's grandfather and his five brothers ran away from slavery in Carroll County, Tennessee,
Mhm.
and joined with the 61st Colored Troop Regiment.
Mhm.
And one of their engagements on July 14th, 1864, they fought against Nathan Bedford Forrest, and
Mhm.
they were able to repel his attack. Um, in parts of Tennessee, he's heralded as uh, someone to be celebrated. But I would definitely disagree with that.
Right.
He was also a part of a massacre that occurred in uh, Fort Pillow, Tennessee,
Mhm.
uh, in on April 12th of 1864. This Fort Pillow was stationed to or home to a number of colored troops, and there was only 600 of them at the fort. And Nathan Bedford Forrest, he was commanding the army that attacked, and they had well over 1,500 to 2,000 troops, and so they were pretty. It was pretty easy for them to take over,
Mhm.
and a lot of the black troops were surrendering. And
Mhm.
as they surrendered, Nathan Bedford Forrest, his troops would shoot them,
Mhm.
or they would say save the bullets, and they would bayonet them to
Right.
death.
Wow.
And that's documented history.
Yeah.
Um, so I don't have any love lost for these people. You know, in fact, it hits, it hits home hard for you and I. You know, I know how you feel about it.
Con.
And these are things that they take out of school. You know what I mean? Things that our children don't really learn about now. And I'm sure that they have a reason. They, if they could, they would erase his name from that organization, and they've erased other people's names from that organization because he wasn't the only one that started it. But you would be hard pressed to find, those other individuals that started it, and I believe that's by design as well. But you won't get away. I'll yield there.
Exactly. You will not get away. And we've learned earnestly never trust your enemy, because your enemy is wicked. And the wickedness of your enemy is not going to allow you to surrender. So never surrender. Never even think about surrender, because your enemy won't take your surrender. They won't treat you with respectfully. They'll treat you as a casualty as opposed to an actual anything else. Now, somebody else can surrender, but not you, so-called black man. But anyhow, let's get to the next video. And this one is called The Uncomfortable Truth About Christianity and Slavery, brought to us by Black Cultures Unlocked. Again, all video links are in the description box. Feel free to definitely check out the video there. And here we go.
I'm not talking fiction here. I'm talking historical facts. What was the role of the Christian church in the destruction, enslavement, exploitation, and marginalization of black people? Pope Nicholas V, a Roman Catholic Church Pope in the 14th century, is the one who said, I'm talking about the Pope, he gave permission that black people can be enslaved, made to be slaves. And the justification he gave was that black people are at the level of animals. They do not have a soul. So he gave authorization for the enslavement, exploitation, lynching, raping, and destruction of black people. That's when it started by Pope Nicholas V. A white pope said you are an animal. I'm talking about your ancestors. It started in the church. Secondly, King Leopold II. Now, you can go and Google the letter of King Leopold II. And he said, make these black people, tell them, hurry, it is difficult for a rich man to go to heaven. It is like a camel going through a needle's eye. And that's what you must indoctrinate them with. Indoctrinate them. Tell them it is okay for they can struggle and suffer here on earth. Tell them they must not mind to struggle and suffer here on earth. Because in heaven, they will walk on the street of gold. Tell them that the gold which is here on earth is worthless. I'm saying this to open your mind for the damage that is in the mind of the black person was crafted, it was designed from the church pulpit.
Christianity preaches love and justice, yet for centuries it was exploited to justify and maintain the enslavement of African people. Enslaved Africans were told that their bondage was divinely ordained and that salvation lay in obedience to their masters. Meanwhile, slaveholders claimed they were saving souls even as they inflicted cruelty. This video explores how Christianity was twisted into a tool of control over enslaved Africans, and how those in bondage found ways to nurture a liberating faith of their own. It is a story of pain and hypocrisy, but also of resilience and spiritual resistance that echoes to this day. From the very start of the transatlantic slave trade, religion provided a ready justification for enslaving Africans. In the 15th century, as European empires expanded into Africa, their rulers and clergy argued that spreading Christianity was a righteous duty that excused the horrors of human bondage. In 1452, Pope Nicholas V issued an edict blessing the conquest and enslavement of African heathens as part of a holy mission. Later popes affirmed this policy, even accepting enslaved Africans as gifts in Rome, a sign of how deeply the Church was entangled in the traffic of human souls. Catholic and Protestant powers alike invoked faith to defend slavery. The Roman Catholic Church played a central role in legitimizing the trade for Spain and Portugal, and church institutions sometimes directly owned or profited from enslaved labor. Across the Atlantic, the Church of England itself owned a sprawling sugar plantation in Barbados, where hundreds of black men, women, and children toiled in grueling conditions to enrich that religious institution. European missionaries and Jesuit plantation owners rationalized that slavery was a path to evangelization, claiming that by capturing and working African people, they were also saving their souls. In their eyes, Africans were infidels to be conquered and saved. The cross rode alongside the sword as colonizers embarked on this brutal mission. This mindset took root in the Americas. Colonists often believed converting enslaved Africans would make them more obedient and submissive. In many colonies, masters were encouraged, even required by law, to bring slaves into the Christian fold. For example, in 1667, the Virginia colony passed a law declaring that baptism of slaves doth not exempt them from bondage. This edict calmed slaveholders' fears that a baptized slave might claim freedom. The message was clear: Christianity would serve the slave system, not undermine it. Becoming a Christian was never to alter an enslaved person's status, only to sanctify their servitude. As slavery spread, religious instruction of the enslaved became increasingly systematic. By the 18th century, slaveholding societies had fully integrated Christianity into the institution of slavery. In British colonies, Anglican missionaries preached to slaves using catechisms that stressed loyalty and humility. In French and Spanish territories, Catholic priests baptized enslaved people and taught them the faith, always emphasizing meekness and obedience. Religious conversion was not meant to free the body, only to subdue the spirit. On the auction blocks and plantations, enslavers thus saw themselves as both conquerors and converters. Priests would bless slave ships before they sailed, and sermons reassured merchants that buying and selling humans was part of God's plan. One of the first English slave ships was even named the Good Ship Jesus. The name was a bitter symbol of how cruelty and piety were entwined. Slaveholders baptized millions of captive Africans in the New World, not as an act of liberation, but as another means of control. To them, converting an African to Christianity meant teaching that person to accept a divinely ordained position at the bottom of society. They convinced themselves that slavery was part of God's providence, that by enslaving Africans, they were bringing heathens out of darkness and into salvation. This religious rationale for slavery cast a long shadow over the centuries that followed. It established a narrative that the Bible and the Church endorsed race-based bondage. By clothing an economic crime in the language of faith, enslavers made their exploitation seem virtuous and unassailable. It was a cruel hypocrisy, a betrayal of the very moral teachings of mercy and justice that Christianity preached. Yet, it was powerful. The notion of a God-sanctioned slavery took hold in the American South as firmly as it had in Europe, creating a spiritual cage to accompany the physical chains. On the plantations of the New World, the Bible became a battleground. To enslaved Africans, its words of deliverance and justice whispered hope. To enslavers, those same scriptures became tools to cement their authority. Christian slaveholders cherry-picked verses that would keep enslaved people docile and obedient, while ignoring or suppressing the rest of the Holy Book. Their favorite texts spoke volumes about their intentions. From the Old Testament, they seized upon the story of Noah's sons, particularly a distorted interpretation of Noah's curse upon Ham. In this twisted telling, Ham, supposedly the forefather of African peoples, was cursed to be a servant of servants to his brothers. Generations of slave owners cited this so-called curse of Ham as biblical proof that Black people were destined by God to be slaves. It did not matter that this idea wasn't truly supported by Scripture. It provided a convenient divine justification for human bondage. Equally popular was a line from the New Testament: "Servants, be obedient to them that are your masters according to the flesh." This verse from Ephesians 6:5 was intoned endlessly in plantation churches. Enslavers would remind their captives that God's word required them to serve their earthly masters as faithfully as they served Christ. Meanwhile, any scripture that emphasized equality or freedom was kept out of reach. A verse like, "There is neither bond nor free, for ye are all one in Christ Jesus," never made it into the slaves' lessons, because such radical ideas threatened the entire system. Pro-slavery preachers went to great lengths to defend slavery as ordained by God. They pointed out that patriarchs like Abraham owned slaves and noted that Jesus never explicitly condemned slavery. In the American South, many ministers argued that slavery was part of the natural order. Enslaved Africans, they claimed, were like children in need of guidance, and bondage was a means to civilize a heathen race. One prominent clergyman even warned abolitionists not to interfere, insisting that through slavery, millions of Africans had been brought to Christianity who would have otherwise been heathen. In this upside-down theology, plantations were imagined as places of righteous mission, harsh, but ultimately for the slave's own good. Other preachers taught a cruel lesson in patience. In Virginia, Bishop William Meade told enslaved people that if they were whipped for something they didn't do, they should accept it as God's will and be grateful it wasn't worse. He argued that unjust suffering would earn them a greater reward in heaven. This perverse doctrine urged the oppressed to embrace their oppression as a spiritual virtue. Enslaved people were not blind to the hypocrisy. Many of them could see the glaring contradiction between the master's Christianity and the gospel's true message. Frederick Douglass, a formerly enslaved man, famously condemned the slaveholders' religion. The Christianity of Christ, he observed, was about love and equality, but the Christianity of the land was bad, corrupt, and wicked, full of cruelty and greed, masquerading as piety. To accept one, he wrote, was to reject the other. Indeed, what slaveholders practiced was a hollow imitation of faith, twisted beyond recognition to justify their greed. Yet this hollow faith was imposed on enslaved people day after day. Over years of captivity, countless slaves heard nothing from Christian teaching except commands to obey. Hellfire was promised for disobedience, and heaven was dangled as a reward for good, submissive servants. By warping the core tenets of Christianity, slaveholders turned the church into an instrument of mental control. Every sermon that justified slavery became another coil in the rope binding the minds of the enslaved, even as their bodies remained in chains. To maintain their grip on power, enslavers knew they had to control not just the bodies of enslaved Africans, but also their minds and souls. This meant controlling how Christianity was taught to them. Across the slaveholding world, planters and authorities took steps to ensure that the version of Christianity reaching Black people was one that kept them obedient and submissive. One notorious example of this manipulation was the so-called Slave Bible. Published in 1807 for use on British plantations in the Caribbean, this Bible was heavily edited to remove any passage that might encourage liberation. It completely omitted the story of Exodus entirely. No Moses ever told Pharaoh, "Let my people go." It also removed any verses that spoke of equality and freedom. In contrast, it retained the directive, "Servants, be obedient to your masters," which enslavers loved to cite. The Slave Bible's message to enslaved readers was clear. God wanted them to submit, stay faithful, and not even dream of deliverance. Even outside of this special Bible, the philosophy behind it was widespread. In the American South, it was illegal in many places to teach enslaved people to read, partly to prevent them from reading the actual Bible and discovering its liberating themes. As one formerly enslaved woman recalled, white slaveholders were afraid to let the children learn anything. They never let them know anything, because an educated slave would be harder to manage. Instead, slave owners insisted on spoon-feeding scripture to their slaves in a tightly controlled way. Plantation owners kept close watch on all religious activity. On many plantations, enslaved people were allowed to attend church only under the supervision of a white minister or a hand-picked black preacher who knew to stay within bounds. The sermons in these settings all had the same theme: slaves must obey their masters and accept their place. Lucretia Alexander, who was enslaved in Mississippi, said the white preacher, "Just say, serve your masters. Don't steal your master's turkey. Don't steal your master's hogs. Do whatsoever your master tells you to do." Same old thing all the time. There was no talk of biblical justice or liberation coming from the plantation pulpit, only a distorted gospel of submission. Authorities also passed laws to quash any unsupervised black worship. States like Georgia forbade gatherings of enslaved people for prayer unless a white person was present. Slaveholders lived in fear that true Christianity, with its talk of spiritual equality and deliverance, could spark rebellion if enslaved people interpreted it for themselves. To preempt this, they did everything possible to keep a lid on independent religious expression. The control extended to every facet of religious life. Even black ministers were tightly regulated. Those permitted to preach were often instructed to stick to messages about obedience and the afterlife, avoiding any hint that God disapproved of slavery. If any enslaved person tried to hold a prayer meeting in secret, the punishment was severe. Moses Grandy, an enslaved man, recalled that his brother-in-law Isaac, who was also an enslaved preacher, was caught conducting a clandestine service. He was brutally flogged, and his wounds were pickled with brine as punishment. The other listeners were whipped until they revealed everyone else who had been there. Through violence, intimidation, and censorship, slaveholders crafted a version of Christianity that would not challenge the status quo. They turned a faith meant to uplift the downtrodden into one that justified keeping people down. Yet even as this oppressive religious regimen reigned, not all hope was lost. Enslaved men and women quietly hungered for the true message of the Bible, one that promised justice and freedom, and they quietly resolved to seek it beyond their master's reach. Despite slaveholders' efforts to control the narrative, the true spirit of faith proved impossible to extinguish. Enslaved Africans quietly reshaped Christianity into a source of hope and resistance. At night, far from overseers, they created their own sacred gatherings. These clandestine meetings, often called hush harbors or the invisible church, were places where enslaved people could worship freely in secret. Great secrecy and ingenuity protected these meetings. Under moonlight, small groups would steal away into the trees. They posted lookouts and muffled their hymns by hanging up wet blankets or quilts around the prayer space, and sometimes sang into water-filled pots so their voices would not carry. By these means, people who had labored in silence all day could finally lift their voices in worship beyond the reach of the master's ears. In the hush harbor, they preached a very different gospel than the one heard in the plantation chapel. Enslaved believers turned to biblical stories of deliverance that white preachers avoided. They drew strength from Moses demanding Pharaoh to let my people go, from the Israelites' exodus out of bondage, and from the idea that Jesus Christ suffered alongside them. The verses slaveholders tried to hide, the scriptures of justice and hope, lived on in the sermons and prayers of the enslaved. Singing was a central part of these secret services. The spirituals that enslaved people composed were more than church songs. They were coded messages and declarations of faith. A song like Steal Away to Jesus signaled an upcoming secret meeting or escape, while Go Down Moses proclaimed that the enslaved, like Israel of old, would be delivered. Such hymns, whispered under the stars, nourished a quiet rebellion in the soul. They affirmed that in God's eyes, the enslaved were his children and worthy of freedom. Away from white supervision, worshippers also revived elements of their African heritage. Rhythmic clapping, dancing in a ring, and call and response chants, traditions from West Africa, blended with Christian prayers and Bible hymns. This emotional, soulful worship strengthened their community and gave them a sense of identity beyond what slaveholders could strip away. Each hidden prayer meeting was, in itself, an act of defiance. Enslaved people were claiming ownership of the religion that had been used to demean them. They prayed for freedom, called each other brother and sister, and trusted that a higher law than the masters was at work. When slave owners discovered these illicit services, they often reacted with fury. Whippings were the typical punishment for anyone caught worshiping in secret, and some paid with their lives for the crime of praying without permission. The risk was great, yet the gatherings continued. The light of faith nurtured in the hush harbors only grew brighter under oppression. On rare occasions, this underground faith burst into outright rebellion. The most famous example was Nat Turner's uprising in 1831. Turner, an enslaved preacher, believed God called him to lead his people out of bondage, like a modern-day Moses. He and a band of followers in Virginia rose up and killed several slaveholders before the revolt was suppressed. The incident terrified the white South, a stark reminder that the Bible's message of justice could ignite a revolution. In response, slave states enforced even stricter bans on black congregations and preaching, hoping to snuff out any spark of insurrectionary faith. Still, the flame kindled in the invisible church could not be extinguished. Through every crackdown, enslaved Christians kept praying, singing, and believing in a better day to come. In their hearts, they carried a vision of a just God who would one day wipe away their tears. This stubborn faith created an inner freedom that no amount of whippings could destroy. The invisible church had laid the spiritual groundwork for liberation. When emancipation finally arrived, it found a people unbroken in spirit, sustained by a faith that had already set them free on the inside. When slavery was abolished, African Americans did not abandon Christianity. They transformed it into a force for empowerment. In the late 19th century, freed people across the South established their own churches, finally free to worship without white oversight. These independent black churches became pillars of the community. The same Bible once misused to subjugate them is now read through the lens of liberation. Black preachers openly denounced the slaveholders' theology as a lie, and instead emphasized that God stood with the oppressed, not the oppressor. In their sermons and songs, they affirmed that the Lord had heard the cry of his people, vindicating their long struggle. Through the 20th century, the black church assumed a leading role in the pursuit of civil rights. It was often the only institution fully controlled by black citizens, and it served as a safe haven to organize and speak out. Black ministers and gospel songs provided the soundtrack and moral framework of the civil rights movement. Figures like Reverend Martin Luther King Jr. drew on biblical language, speaking of Exodus and promised lands, to rally people against segregation. What had once been a slave religion in the eyes of racists became a wellspring of courage and justice. The church that slaveholders hoped would make black people submissive instead produced leaders who challenged an unjust society. In recent times, many have reflected on the complex legacy of this history. Some skeptics have called Christianity the white man's religion and wondered why black people would embrace a faith used to justify their ancestors' enslavement. Yet others respond that African Americans remade Christianity in their own image, turning it from a weapon into a shield. Scholars note that the black church was not merely an opiate to dull pain, but also, in Karl Marx's words, a protest against real suffering, the heart of a heartless world. In other words, black believers did take solace in religion, but they also found in it a voice to denounce the very injustice it was meant to console. Today, black churches intentionally remember the past as they look to the future. Traditions like Watch Night, an annual New Year's Eve service commemorating Freedom's Eve on December 31st, 1862, keep the memory of slavery and emancipation alive. Congregations sing the old spirituals, songs born in bondage, as hymns of triumph, fully aware of their origins. By preserving these rituals, the community honors the faith of enslaved ancestors who held on to hope against all odds. The broader Christian world has also begun to confront this history. Churches that once defended slavery or segregation have issued apologies and sought reconciliation for their complicity. This acknowledgement does not erase the past, but it does shine a light on how religion can be twisted and how it can be redeemed. Ultimately, the tale of how Christianity was used to control enslaved Africans offers a powerful lesson. It warns that even a message of love can be perverted to evil ends. At the same time, it shows the resilience of the human spirit and the redemptive power of faith. Black Americans managed to salvage from Christianity a gospel of liberation, turning a tool of oppression into a source of strength. The journey from plantation sermons to freedom songs demonstrates that the meaning of a religion is not fixed. It can be claimed and reshaped by those whom it was meant to suppress. In the end, the oppressor's efforts to chain the souls of the enslaved failed. The very faith that was supposed to break them helped make them unbreakable. Their belief in a just God sustained them through slavery's darkest nights, and that legacy of faith continues to inspire generations today. If you found value in this video,
oh my, oh, I'm glad that's over. Whew, okay, let's start from the top. Yeah, no, Christianity is not any means of reprieve for our people. Christianity is a religion that is meant to give Europeans a manner of to feel good. It's not for our people. Our people who are in that horrible situation, deplorable situation, need to come out of it because it is destructive to our people. And at the very end, where she was talking about watch night and all manner of other evils, these are things that our people should not be dealing with. When I was talking about our people, I mean so-called Negroes, so-called Black people who came to this country as slaves. This is not for you because we are the children of Israel, and our power requires that we do not do such things. We don't participate in these idol worship rituals and these wicked ways of false religion. That's for the heathen. That's not for us. Let the heathen have that and do what they see fit. But that's not for our people. And I want our people to get away from the idea that somehow, some way, religion is going to bring you some kind of solace. It's not. We were not created for religion. Religion was not created for us. The Most High separated us to Himself. And let me see what scripture I'm thinking about that. I think it's Deuteronomy. Is it 32 or 34? When the Most High separated the people,
the sons of separated us from the Gentiles. Let's see. I want to say that's 32.
I think so. I believe it is. All right, let me see.
And that was the song of Moshe.
Yeah. When the Most High.
Yeah, verse 8. When the Most High divided. Oh, Salaki, you gonna grab it?
Yeah. Let me put it on the screen here. Yeah.
Okay.
I got you. Yeah. When the Most High, this is Deuteronomy chapter number 32 and verse 8. When the Most High divided to the nations their inheritance. So each nation got an inheritance through the Most High. When He separated, not brought together, but separated the sons of Adam, He set the bounds of the people. The ends of the people, he said it according to the number of the children of Israel. Verse 9, for Yahuwah's portion is his people. Jacob is the lot of his inheritance. So
Hallelujah.
that is all praises to the Most High. That is certainly and definitely a separation of us from these other people. We are not to fall in with them and do what it is that they do. In fact, the very reason that we were allowed to be brought here and scattered through the four quarters of the earth as slaves was for punishment for the evils that we had done previously, for those evils that our people had done to the Most High previously. So you sit right now, regardless of where you at, whether you're in Alabama, Mississippi, Florida, Texas, Georgia, Maine, New York, Chicago, Detroit, Baltimore, wherever you are in the United States, even if you're in Canada, if you're in South America, if you're in Central America, wherever you are, even if you're in a Kebulon, whether you're in Nigeria, Ghana, Kenya, Congo, wherever you are separated to the Most High. And the reason that you are there is because our people went off, and this is the punishment. We got scattered, and that takes away our power, our ability to stand. Imagine if we were all together on the same in the same place on the same accord. Who could stop us? Who could even contend with us? Nobody. We could take whatever it is we desire to take. Salaki, excuse me. But the point of the matter is, um, don't ever feel like religion, whether it's Christianity, Islam, Buddhism, Hinduism, any of these religions, don't ever feel like any of these religions is going to be the solace or the resolution for our people. Religion is never going to be a resolution for our people. Religion is only a stumbling block for our people. That is the purpose of religion for the so-called Negro, is to cause you to stumble, because you are the Israelites that the Bible speaks of. You are those people. So the Most High have given you clear and present instructions on how to deal with him and how to deal one with another. So religion is not going to have you properly go into that. Christianity is not going to teach you that. Islam is not going to teach you that. Buddhism is not going to teach you that. Hinduism is not going to teach you that. Whatever the Chinese deal with, the Japanese is not going to teach you any of that. The whatever, I don't even know what they deal with. But so we got to stop that mind thinking. We got to stop that thinking that it's got to be some kind of religion. Now, were there times in the past where our people cleaved to Christianity and it was able to, and the people were able to build from that? Yes, that happens. Yes, there are religious sects that have so-called Negroes in them, and they do various things. They do, some of them look like they do well, but the foundation of that it was built on a broken foundation. The foundation was never whole. It was always broken, because that is never supposed to be what we are about. So Christianity is not going to save you. Islam, all these religions, none of these religions are going to save you. Your Savior is the Most High. And he also has a Redeemer, the Messiah. That's what's going to save us. And all of these, every now and again, we come across a video that just sets me off. But let me rest here go ahead, Aki.
You know, if we look at that papal bull that came from Pope Nicholas V, that was issued in 1450, and this gave the Portuguese the right to enslave what they would deem pagans or other unbelievers. Now, what do we know about Portugal and who was in that land?
Exactly.
We know that the Yahudim were there and had been there for some centuries. The family of Yahya bin Negro or Yahya de Negro, Yahya the Black, right?
Right.
His family at one point being a part of the Portuguese army and helping them repel the Arabs that were in the land. That was maybe 300 years before this papal bull came out. But it's just ironic that you help the Portuguese, then later they turn their swords against you, and this began the transatlantic slave trade. I mean, it's not funny, but I laugh out of the irony of it all.
Yeah.
This began the early transatlantic slave trade with this papal bull. And like you said, this what do we know? In truth, we know in truth that those believers in the first church were never called Christian. They were called Messianic. And there's a big difference between those Messianics of that first church and what we see today, or what would become Christianity. Christianity being that of the Roman religion. And like you said, what we do is not religion. Our duty is to fear the Most High and keep His commandments. So that's not religion. That's just obedience.
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly.
But yeah, this is good stuff. I just, as the video was going on, man, I went down a rabbit hole, and so much information out there, about the Negroes and how Yahya had became master of the village of the Negroes, and from 1450 until the 1800s, this oppression continued against those people who were deemed non-believers of Christianity. And what do we know about these people? They were all Israelites, that were being placed into captivity. And I would say that these people who were doing it were aware of who they were placing in captivity. But I will. It's some good history and some good reading. I'll yield there.
One of our elders, Elder Benaiah, Hidden Hebrews, shared a video a while back, and I posted it onto the channel. I can't remember the name of it, but he read the order that came from Spain and the separate order that came from Portugal that said that these Hebrews, these Yahudim, you can take their stuff and sell them into slavery. The only thing is you have to bring half of their stuff to him, to the ruler, the king. And so that gave these people credence to go and hunt for Israelites and take their stuff. So whatever you had, they could come in and take it. And the only caveat is they had to take half of that and give it to the one that gave the order, and the rest of it they could keep. And that, by the way, they sold you into slavery. So if they sold you and got, let's put it in modern terms, let's say they got $2,000 for you. Well, that's today's money. Let's say they got $2,000 for you. They kept 1,000. They had to give him 1,000. So that's pretty good work considering there's an unlimited amount of Israelites that you can grab and take their stuff and sell, and you can make a pretty big bankroll off of doing that and selling them into slavery. He covered that. One last thing, um, talking about this religion and crap. You know, I really hate this stuff, and reason being, I flip over here to Twitter to X, and this guy, I don't know this guy, Daniel Titus, the preacher, and he's sharing this image of Caesar Borgia as if this is some kind of a savior for people that look like him, and he looks like me. So
Wow.
that is problematic. But he's not the only one, because this guy in the same feed is sharing a similar image with this crooked cross, this Latin cross, and he's got a picture of uh, another Caesar, another version of Caesar, talking about, get this mess. This person, this idol is not saving you. You are not going to be saved by this idol. This idol is not saving you. These are idols. These are not the power of the Most High. These are idols. And you should be shaming yourself for passing this stuff around. And I don't even know if these are real people, but whoever this is should be ashamed of themselves for passing this mess around, because this is not real. This is false. This is idol. This is idolatry. This man is not a savior of anybody. He can't save himself, let alone save you. This man in real life was a very wicked, very evil, doing man who created all manner of wicked doings, and none of those were for you to follow. He was wicked by a measure that you couldn't even begin to understand, because of the level of wickedness that he dealt with. It's unheard of today. It's unreasonable. Uh, sickening, completely sickening. This always happens every now and again. We'll come across a video and they go into some stuff, and I mean, it just literally just triggers, and is always some horrible, deplorable, wicked, evil stuff, and it never comes by itself. It's always some other uh, some other stuff that goes with it, and it's always some idolatry, some wicked living, and it's always our people doing it. So, all right, I'm gonna go ahead and close this on out before I get my blood pressure up too high.
Uh,
All right, we do this for a specific purpose. Why do we do it? Romans chapter 10 and verse 1. Brethren, my heart's desire and prayer to Ha'abba, to the Father, for Israel is that they might be saved. We want to see our people saved. We want to see our people set free. We want to see our people restored to the prominence that the Most High had promised us. How are we going to do it? First of all, we're going to keep the faith and the belief in the Messiah, Hamashiach. Not that fake character, but the real Messiah. And that he's going to do what the Most High have made plans for him to do, and that is bring us where we should be. Also, Ecclesiastes number 12 and verse 13. Let us, in the conclusion of the whole matter, fear the Most High and keep his commandments, for this is the whole duty of man. It is so very important to understand it. In the conclusion of the whole matter, we are to fear the Most High and keep his commandments, for this is the whole duty of man. At the end of the day, when it is all said and done, all the dust is settled and all the smoke is cleared, we will be judged, or rather, we have feared the Most High and kept his commandments. Why? Because this is the whole duty of man. I am Akazaki Yahu, joined by my most esteemed Akinanaya, giving all praises, honor, and great esteem unto the Most High Power, Yahweh, Bashem, Hamashiach, Wamalak, Yahushua, and to the 12 tribes of Israel who were scattered to the four quarters of the earth, I say shalom, wa baruki, that is peace and blessings. And I cannot wait to the day when the Most High brings us back together and we are once again 12 tribes, one family, one nation under the Most High power, under one covenant, back in our own land with a heart of flesh and no more a heart of stone, with our enemies, our adversaries, and all those who would oppose us under our feet. Until that day come, shalom, family.
Shalom, Mr. Pakai.
All praises to the Most High. Praise you, Abba Yah, Kwam Yasha'Allah,
Kwam Yasha Allah.
and Barak Hashem Yahweh.